Yo, what is going on, y'all? It's your boy, it's your host, Calvin Domingo, aka Steezy A. Smith, coming at y'all with another episode, with another edition, with another segment of Breaking Down the Trade, brought to you by the 32-Bit Network. And this time, today, we are going to be featuring quarterback Baker Mayfield and the Carolina Panthers. Now, off tops, if you guys haven't heard of the exact trade details, as reported by Ian Rappaport of NFL Network, the Cleveland Browns are trading disgruntled quarterback Baker Mayfield finally to the Carolina Panthers in exchange for a conditional 2024 fifth-round pick, which can become a fourth-round pick based on playing time. And as far as how much the Panthers are paying of Baker Mayfield, Cleveland's actually going to be paying $10.5 million of Baker Mayfield's approximate $19 million salary, guaranteed salary this year. And the Carolina Panthers are only paying Baker Mayfield about $5 million. So Baker Mayfield took about a $3.5 million pay cut, which he can't earn back in incentives, obviously, if he hits some of those incentives with the Carolina Panthers. Now, even with the trade to bring in a Baker Mayfield, it's not a lock that Carolina is going to be starting Baker Mayfield. He will engage in a quarterback competition between him and Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold has about the same contract as a Baker Mayfield. He's guaranteed just a shade under $19 million this year. But when you combine that with the fact that Carolina is only paying Baker Mayfield about $5 million in guaranteed salary, then they're only committed about $23 to $24 million in guaranteed salary this coming season for both quarterbacks combined. And look, I don't think that's a terrible value at all. Now, if you guys follow me on Twitter, and if you aren't already, please be sure to follow me on Twitter on @SteezyASmith, SteezyASmith. Like I said on there, this trade was inevitable. I had this entire time, I didn't have Seattle, but I had Carolina as the most realistic and as the most logical landing spot for Baker Mayfield. Matt Rule is desperate. He's 10-23 in his last two seasons as a head coach in the NFL. And I know it hasn't been entirely his fault. He's dealt with injuries, but in the NFL, they only care about results. They only care about wins. And so when they see 10-23 in the last two seasons, they're not really going to care too much about the circumstances that surrounded why you went 10-23. And look, I don't think Baker Mayfield is a huge upgrade over Sam Darnold, but he's a marginal upgrade. But in the NFL, anytime you have a marginal upgrade at quarterback, that means a lot, just because quarterback means so much, just because they have so much value. And so, like I was talking about, it's not guaranteed that Baker Mayfield does win the starting job. He still has to compete with the Sam Darnold, but if he's fully healed from his shoulder injury from last season, I believe he'll beat out a Sam Darnold. I mean, he's just not only more of a dog, he plays with a chip on his shoulder, he's also playing for another contract. And I'm not saying he's a franchise quarterback by any means, but we've seen him with a playoff caliber supporting cast before in Cleveland, right? Now, the offensive line is literally the difference between Carolina's offensive line and Cleveland's is night and day. Cleveland has one of the best in the business. Carolina still has one of the worst, even after drafting an Ike Okongwu. Now, it is getting better, so the trajectory is moving slightly upwards, but there's still a lot of work to go in that regard. Now, as far as another positive, or as far as a positive for the Carolina Panthers, they do have Christian McCaffrey. And I understand he's missed a whole bunch of games, a plethora of games in the last 2 years. But going back to last year, I mean, the Carolina Panthers started off hot. And Christian McCaffrey was still healthy. Sam Darnold actually looked good. And in games in which Christian McCaffrey was healthy, let me look, there was 4-3 when Christian McCaffrey was in the lineup. Now, without him, 1-9. Right? 1-9. But people forget Carolina's defense last year, with the exception of red zone defense, they finished as a top 2 overall defensive unit in the NFL last year, barely allowing over 300 yards per game. So there's a lot of pieces to work with. J.C. Horn, their rising star cornerback, actually missed the majority of last year. And so they have a whole bunch of pieces on defense. Brian Burns was a Pro Bowler. They're counting on Yader Gross-Matos to kind of step up. Jeremy Chin is still back there. Shaq Thompson is still back there. Derek Brown in the interior of the defensive line. And so they have a backbone defensively. They have pieces that work defensively and offensively. I know it's a big if. I know it's a big ask, but Christian McCaffrey, he's there, arguably the best running back of football when healthy. Baker Mayfield, we've seen what he can do when he's healthy and when he has a playoff caliber supporting cast around him. And his receivers aren't lacking. Terrace Marshall should take that next step forward going into his second season. DJ Moore is a bona fide number 1 in the NFL. And I think for fantasy football purposes, y'all might need to fade Robbie Anderson. I don't know how he's feeling right now, but as you guys do know, a couple of months ago when it was reported that Carolina had interest in acquiring a Baker Mayfield, he wasn't really in favor of that. And then a couple of months later, he's mulling retirement. And so I'm playing, I'm joking. I do think that fantasy-wise, obviously all the receivers in Carolina, I think they have a bump up in value, and that includes a Robbie Anderson. But who knows? I mean, after how that OBJ and Baker Mayfield situation played out in Cleveland, maybe there's already bad blood between Baker Mayfield and Robbie Anderson. But I say all this to say that, look, because the NFC is a lot weaker than it has been in years past, because the NFC is more top heavy than the AFC, and because the NFC is the least or is the lesser conference between the NFC and the AFC, all things, and I know this is a big ask, I know we're playing the what if game, but if Christian McCaffrey can stay relatively healthy, if Baker Mayfield can stay healthy, I can see this team competing for the 7th or 6th playoff spot in the NFC. I think Carolina's defense is that good. I think the NFC is that weak towards the bottom at least. And I think Baker Mayfield, he's not a franchise caliber quarterback in the NFL, but he most definitely is an above average and a starting caliber quarterback in the National Football League. I can see this team winning 7 games, 8 games, maybe even 9 games. I think the ceiling is 9 games. Like I said, Matt Rule is desperate. Baker Mayfield is an upgrade. They're not paying him that much. The cost to acquire him wasn't that much. It's all going to start and kick off in week 1 as the Carolina Panthers host Cleveland. And look, Deshaun Watson is probably not going to be there. And so it's going to be Jacoby Brissett most likely versus Baker Mayfield. I know it's early, but give me Carolina in this one. But overall, I love the trades for excuse me. Overall, I love the trade for both sides. I think Carolina, like I said, they're getting a marginal upgrade at quarterback, but in the NFL, that means a lot. For Cleveland, you lose a guy that didn't want to be there, and you get a 5th-round pick that could become a 4th-round pick that's more likely to become a 4th-round pick, and you're only paying about half of that guaranteed $19 million salary. And so I think this is a win for both sides. I'm happy for Baker Mayfield. It's about time he got traded, and like I said at the top of the show, there is still 3 weeks until training camp starts. And so I'm not saying that that's the most amount of time, but there is still some time for him to kind of establish some chemistry with his teammates, kind of, get the playbook down and whatnot. But again, this is a win-win for both sides. I sign off on the trade, and we're going to end it right there. Again, it has been your host. It has been your boy, Calvin Domingo, a.k.a. Steezy A. Smith, breaking it down on another edition of Breaking Down the Trade, brought to you by the 32-Bit Network. Y'all have a great rest of your day. Stay blessed. Nothing but love. Steezy out.